On a Tuesday in August 1882, I drove a mule team in the deepest seam of the Indian Ridge Colliery. The mule on the offside had been below ground for 11 years and had not seen daylight since the year my daughter was born. The man on the offside, walking beside the mule with the carbide lamp, had not been with us when we yoked the team. He had a mule's eye for an eye. My name is Padraig Doyle, 65 years old, sitting in a kitchen in Pottsville, Pennsylvania in 1909. My eyes have been going the gray way since 1901. Anthracite dust, the doctor says. Nothing to be done. I do not argue with him. In 1882, I was 38 and had driven mules in the number 4 seam at Indian Ridge for 19 years. My father brought me down at 15 and was killed the following year when a timber failed on the 40-foot level. The smell of damp anthracite and mule sweat and carbide gas was in me before I could grow a beard. Indian Ridge sat above Shenandoah in Schuylkill County, reading railroad country. The Philadelphia and Reading Coal and Iron Company owned the land, the mine, the company store, and the Patchtown houses. I paid rent in company script. My daughter Mairéad, 9 that August, sat the breaker chute from 6 until 4 for 10 cents a day, picking slate from coal on steel that ran cold even in summer. I argued with the foreman twice. A third argument, he said, would cost me my mine number. The coal and iron police stood at the top of the road. The Mollie Maguires had been hanged in 1877. You did not argue a third time. Father Daniel McDermott came to the cage at first shift on Mondays, a Mayo man, same county my grandmother came from before the famine. He said the Latin over the men going down, and I always waited to hear his voice before I stepped onto the cage. One thing my father told me about mules, because it is the whole ground of what follows. He said, the mule will tell you the seam is wrong before any timberman will. A mule underground long enough will stop dead in a gangway where gas is building or a roof is about to come down, and no persuasion will move it. The older men in the number 4 seam trusted the mules more than the safety lamps. I had 14 mules in the underground stable at 800 feet. I had given 13 of them Irish names. Act 2. The 14th of August, I was at the gate before sunup. I had stopped at the breaker to watch Mairéad climb to her board. She did not look down at me. She had learned not to, because looking down made the morning harder. I watched until she was settled and walked to the shaft. Father McDermott was not at the gate, a summer cold gone to his chest. I went down at 6:10 without the Latin words, 800 feet in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I timed it by the verse of a lullaby my grandmother taught me in the old Mayo Irish, a dialect I had not heard from any living person since she died in 1851 when I was 7. I sang it under my breath on every descent. The underground stable was 60 feet off the shaft, cut into the ribs of the seam. Mule and wet straw and anthracite, dust and the carbide hiss from bracket lamps on the corner posts. My 14 mules in their stalls. I named 13 in Irish. Bridget and Connell and Fintan and Siobhan and Diarmuid and Roisin and Lorcan and Neve and Cathal and Maeve and Donal and Sorcha and Ciaran. The 14th was 6 weeks down. A replacement after Dare broke a foreleg on the iron rail in July. I had not named her yet. My father said to wait until you know the animal's character. I yoked 10 of the named mules for the run to the number 4 face gangway, 300 feet back and 40 feet lower than the stable. Sheeran on the offside, team moving by 6:40. The number 4 gangway was 5 feet 4 at the crown, and I walked bent, carbide lamp on my cap, throwing a white cone along the left rib. Anthracite is not bituminous. It does not flame from a lamp. The dust is finer than soft coal dust, and it settles deeper in the lung. My spit has been black since 1859. On the third pass of the morning, a man was walking beside Kieran on the offside, in step with the mule, in the narrow space between the rib wall and the tub, his own carbide lamp lit at his cap. I did not remember him yoking up with me. I did not remember him in the cage. Kieran did not react to him. That was the first wrong thing, 2 minutes before the second wrong thing. In a coal gangway, every man breathes heavy from dust and low air. You hear the breath of every man near you. This man made no sound of breathing. The dust rose in a black cloud at knee height, and he walked through it, and there was no dust on his lamp glass. Every other lamp in that gangway had a skin of dust on the glass by mid-morning. His was clean. Act 3. I turned my carbide lamp on him. His face was a working man's face, broad through the jaw, weathered, canvas jacket, cord trousers. Nothing wrong with it except the eye nearest my lamp. That eye was not a man's eye. It was the pale gray filmed-over eye of a mule kept underground long enough that the daylight is entirely gone from it. The gray film comes in after 3 or 4 years without sun, clouding from the outside edge of the iris inward until the whole eye is a uniform, pale gray. No clear pupil, no expression you can read. Slightly larger than a man's eye, no white at the edges. A mule's eye in a man's face. The other eye was still a man's eye, Irish blue. The color my grandmother described when she spoke of Clew Bay in Mayo. Watering from my lamp the way a man's eye waters when a light comes near it suddenly in the dark. That eye looked at me and knew it was being looked at. I stopped the team. The mules stopped with me, all 10. Kieran, directly beside the man, did not flinch. The man spoke in Irish. Not the Connaught Irish worn down by 30 years in America, the dialect of my grandmother. Mayo before the famine. The specific soft vowels and the shape of certain words I had not heard from any living person since my grandmother died in the house in Shenandoah in the winter of 1851 with the snow against the windows. He said, in that dialect, "The seam is wrong here, Padraig. The mule has been telling you for an hour. You did not listen." I looked at Kieran because my father's rule came back to me. Look to the mule, not to the man. Kieran's ears were flat back against his skull, not pinned in temper. Flat in the posture I had seen once before. In 1871, 20 minutes before the roof came in on the 40-foot level and killed 3 men and a mule named Aoif. Flat against the skull means the animal knows something is coming down and has nowhere to go. I turned my lamp to the rib pillar on my left, the one I had driven past 3 times that morning. I put my ear against the coal. The groan was very soft and very deep from far back in the stone. The sound anthracite makes when the weight above has shifted and the pillar is beginning to fail. I had heard it twice before in 19 years. I knew what it was. I backed the team. 10 mules in a low heading with the tub train behind them, no room to turn, one lamp, dust rising. 6 minutes. Sheeran backed without any command, as if he had already decided where he was going before I asked. We were 40 feet clear when the seam came down. Not an explosion, a progressive collapse, pillars going one after another in a sound like a long, slow exhalation, and then the air pushed at us from behind, soft, and the dust dropped from the roof in a curtain. 4 men were working the room behind that pillar, Brennan and Kowalski and 2 brothers, Evan and Glenn Griffith. Welsh boys from Mahanoy City. The collapse sealed the room entry but did not reach the room. The coal and iron police rescue team opened the entry 11 hours later and brought all 4 out unhurt. They had sung in the dark. The Griffith brothers had a good harmony. Act 4. There is a rule older than the Indian Ridge Colliery and older than the Reading Railroad. My father told me the rule the year before he was killed the same way his father told him. It came over from Ireland with the first men who went underground in America, folded into someone's memory along with the famine and the names of the townlands. The rule has 3 parts. You do not thank what walks beside the mule in the man's place. Gratitude names the transaction, and naming the transaction gives it a claim on you it does not otherwise have. You do not look at the eye that is not a man's eye. The eye that is still a man's belongs to something that has agreed, at least in part, to look at you. The other eye has not agreed. You do not ask its name. It will not give you one you can use. Asking invites it to give you something else in place of the name. In the gangway, I did well enough. I backed the team. I did not speak to the man on the offside. I did not look at the other eye again. I did not ask his name. When we reached the main shaft heading, he was still beside Sheeran. He turned his head, and the Irish blue eye looked at me, and I gave him one nod. Not a thank you, an acknowledgement. I believed at the time that this was permitted. I walked the team back to the underground stable. All 10 mules went to their stalls. The man walked in with the team, and the 13 named mules accepted him. Their ears were neutral. The 14th, the unnamed one, was in the far stall. When the man walked in, she went to the back wall and pressed her chest against it, and trembled the way animals tremble when there is a fire they cannot see. I unhooked the team and went to the cage and went up. I brought Mairéad down from her breaker board, told the foreman she was unwell. He did not argue. I worked the next 12 days on the surface beside her on the cold steel chute, my hands cut by the slate edges. The coal and iron police report credited the mule team with saving 4 lives. The mule driver backed the team on the animal's instigation. The report said, I did not correct this account. Act 5, I left Indian Ridge in 1893, the panic year when the Reading Railroad failed and the company laid off 1/3 of the underground men. I have kept books in Pottsville since then. The Indian Ridge Colliery closed permanently in 1907. In October, the company brought the underground mules up before sealing the shaft. They brought 14 out. The stableman's log showed 14 mules as of the October sealing. I had given 13 of them names. The 14th was the young animal never named. the replacement sent down in June of 1882, who had pressed herself against the back wall of her stall in August of that year when the man with the mule's eye for an eye walked in with the team. The closing report noted that 13 of the 14 mules showed the standard underground presentation: pale gray filmed over eyes, the general dulling from decades without daylight. The right eye of the 14th was the same, clouded the regular way. The left eye, when they brought the animal up into the October daylight, was a clear Irish blue. It watered at the sun. It looked at the men handling it the way a man looks at men he is not sure he trusts. The 3 things I did wrong were these. In the gangway, before I turned my lamp on the man on the offside, I had already looked at the other eye. 1 moment in the dark before I turned the lamp. That is the first thing. I gave the nod at the shaft heading. That is the second. And going up alone in the cage, I spoke the last 12 seconds of the lullaby verse I had not finished on the descent. I told myself it was the way I always went up. I believe now I spoke it for him. That is the third thing. My left eye has been going gray since 1901. The doctor says both will be uniform gray within 5 years. He says it is the anthracite. I do not argue with him. I know what it is.